Hello, my name is Hansson, and welcome to another episode of Fix It SF. During these monthly videos, we look at issues facing San Francisco that has the potential to actually be fixed. And today we're going to be talking about Proposition C, the commercial childcare tax that passed prior to 2020 and the pandemic. During that time, the office market was looking at a single-digit vacancy factor with a tremendous amount of workers coming into the city that were with kids. And there was no childcare facilities available. All the few childcare facilities downtown were full, and there was definitely a serious problem dealing with parents that needed to have childcare available close to their offices. So Proposition C was passed, whereby a 3% tax was placed on the income of office buildings, and that was scheduled to generate something in the neighborhood of $110 million. Well, what happens? The pandemic hit. Now we have a vacancy of close to 50% in the office buildings and very few tenants bringing kids to the office. But that tax still exists. And at a time when we have high vacancy, that tax still has to be paid. So when a tenant signs a lease today, he still has to pay that 3% tax. And that tax is still in place, and yet the funds for that tax are going where? They're not going to build childcare facilities. They're basically being used to subsidize childcare workers to raise their minimum standards to $28 an hour. Now, because of the budget deficit the city is looking at, the mayor is now suggesting that she is going to take money from that fund and now apply it to the general fund, which again was never the intent of that tax that was passed by the voters of San Francisco. That's simply wrong. It's wrong in so many fronts. First of all, the tax was passed for child care services. Second, the reality is that our downtown market cannot be faced with more expenditures that other cities have. And therefore, adding that 3% can add thousands of dollars of costs to the bottom line of particularly even small companies, let alone big companies. And that has to change. We need to create incentives to bring office tenants back to San Francisco, not create burdensome taxes so they find us less attractive to come to the city. So first thing in order, we need to look at that tax and say, we need to get rid of that tax. However, will that happen given the circumstances of the fact that we have a serious budget deficit affecting San Francisco? And the reality is that's going to be a tough fight because the city's going to be looking at all coffers to see where they can grab their money. This is where us, the voters, have to step in and say, you know what? That tax was for a specific purpose. If you're going to take that money out of that fund, it should go before the voters to vote on it. They shouldn't just be able to take it. That is not the intent of that tax, and the purposes of balancing the budget is fine, but you need to get voter approval for that to happen. Now, let's talk about childcare and where childcare is together in the city. So, the building on 5th and Folsom Street that we are showing you now, that particular tenant signed the lease pre-pandemic. It previously was an auto garage with a parking lot for the vehicles. And she signed a lease for that space pre-pandemic and had to go through a conditional use permit. And she fell smack right down in the middle of the pandemic. So everything was delayed, everything was bogged down, everything was questioned. And she, unfortunately, was not able to open up that school until later last year. So as a result of that, she's in trouble. As you can see from the pictures, this picture was taken at roughly around 3:30 in the afternoon. Here's a brand new quality facility that struggled to get open, not based upon her delays, but delays of the city. And this is happening all over the place when it comes to daycare. The city says we're going to expedite daycare, we're going to push to get daycare open. The reality is daycare has the same problems that all the other people that face the permit department have. Everything is slow, delayed, cumbersome, and certainly uncertain as to the results. And you compound daycare needs with reviews from the fire department, life safety. It needs so much area of open space to meet the demands of the kids that are inside. The fact that a lot of landlords don't want daycare because of the fact that there's further liability with kids. It becomes very difficult for a daycare facility to get off the ground. The 4 or 5 larger daycare players in town that all have 2 or 3 different locations, every one of them has no interest in expanding in San Francisco at this point. They all would look outside of the city, but they have no interest in doing business in the city. That is not an example of where the city has changed policy and is actually trying to promote and expand daycare facilities for parents. It's unjustifiable that a parent has to pay $3,500 or more to have a child in daycare. It's unconscionable that they have to pay that kind of money. But the reality is, I get it. I do those deals. I understand those deals. The reality is, by the time you go through the process of securing a location, by the time we get through the permitting process, by the time you build it out, by the time you add all of the insurance and everything necessary, you have to charge those kind of money in order to make any sense of the business. So the city needs to figure this out. And what they need to do is they need to streamline the process, truly streamline the process, not talk about it, but streamline it today. They need to get a quick permitting process in place so that fire talks to all the other departments to expedite the process, yay for a site. And once that happens, then you're going to see more interest in going into daycare, because the reality is the few players that do play in this market, they're exhausted with the process. And at the end of the day, it becomes very difficult to make money in that business. And at the end of the day, it's a business and it has to make money. So to conclude, there's 2 aspects to this fix-it. We have the first thing is, let's get a vote of where that money should go to. $110 million is a lot of money. If it was earmarked for childcare and now it's going to be pulled from the budget for some other use, the city voters should have a right to vote on that. Number 2, we need to expedite the permitting process to allow childcare to basically have a smoother ride to open up their doors. If you do that, then rates will go down because you'll have more availability of choices, because there'll be more competition that will in turn drive prices down. Right now you have less competition. It's so hard to get into it that the few people that are into it have a right to charge more for their services. And that's the way you're going to get effective daycare that's affordable for citizens of San Francisco. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to next month's podcast.